We are already at week 8, almost halfway through the season. That is absolutely crazy to think about, but it is also the start of the playoff push for our fantasy championships. So very, very important. Week 8 waivers on tap today. If you like fantasy football, this is going to be the channel for you. We drop 2 videos a week, each and every week. So if you enjoyed at any point, don't forget to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Of course, we're about to be going to 5 total videos a week. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's dive into the waivers. For our Week 7 Fantasy Player of the Week, it could be none other than D'Onta Foreman. And again, I could go with guys like Travis Kelce or even Jordan and Addison, who saved a lot of weeks. But nobody expected D'Onta Foreman to have this kind of week. And whether if you started him or not, luckily for me, I picked him up right before the week started in one of my weeks, or in one of my money leagues, and he actually won me my week. So D'Onta Foreman, shout out to him again. 33 fantasy points, number 1 running back on the week. Again, nobody could have expected this, but he won a lot of people their weeks. Some honorable mentions, we have Lamar Jackson. Of course, he's continuing to dominate this year. Kind of a surprise outing there against a tough Lions defense, or at least we thought. Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Downs, those guys that had breakout games is a way to put it, as they've been on our rosters all year. At least Josh Downs should be. If he's not, we'll talk about that later. These are guys that just had their breakout games, and they should be viable pieces towards our fantasy championship runs. So shout out to those guys, and of course Darren Waller finally showed some relevancy. But of course, don't overreact, as Daniel Jones will be back, and Darren Waller hasn't looked the best with Daniel Jones. But on the flip side, we're going to talk about some guys that have let us down this week. Guys like Bijan Robinson comes to mind, and he is the winner of this award this week, or I guess the loser, whichever way you want to put it. But 1 carry, 3 yards, 0.3 fantasy points on the week. The Falcons failed to put in the correct injury/sick report right before the game, and us fantasy managers struggled, and we suffered because of this, because to our knowledge, nothing was wrong with Bijan Robinson. But then the game starts, and halftime comes around, and this guy has 0 touches. So Bijan Robinson, whether if it's his fault or not, hey, 0.3 fantasy points is 0.3 fantasy points, and it could have lost you your weeks. Luckily for me, I had some other guys to pick up the slack. Some honorable mentions here, again, on the flip side of it, we have guys like Josh Jacobs and Austin Eckler, only had about 5.5 fantasy points. These are guys that were first, second round picks in our drafts, and they are not playing like that. But Austin Eckler gets a little bit of slack because that was his first week back. Raheem Mostert, 6 fantasy points against the tough Eagles defense. I don't know what we were expecting from Mostert, but it wasn't that. And Calvin Ridley, 1.5 fantasy points. At this point, I might as well put a little fire sign next to his name, because he's on this list, it seems like, at least every other week, at least 2 weeks in a row for Calvin Ridley. But moving over to the waiver wire, we're going to start here at the wide receiver position, as Josh Downs only owned in 36% of leagues. I have told you guys this from week 2 of the NFL season. Pick up Josh Downs if you can. He's been on this video each and every week. If you don't believe me, go check out each and every Wednesday's video for the past month and a half, 2 months. So Josh Downs, I'm not going to talk about him too much, but 5 receptions, 125 yards, just had his breakout game, should only continue. Wan'Dale Robinson is the second guy I want to talk about here. This is a guy that his usage, sure, he had a bad week last week, but his usage is only continuing to go up, and Daniel Jones seems to love him. So when Daniel Jones returns to the field for the Giants, he's going to be the guy that he's targeting, aside from Darren Waller, at least. Well, he doesn't throw to Darren Waller, but Wan'Dale Robinson, player out of Kentucky, super quick, super agile, and he's just one of those guys that you throw him a screen pass, and he can take it 60 to 70 yards. Another guy for the Giants that I want to talk about is Jalen Hyatt, a guy that played 80% of the snaps. His usage is out of this world last week, but I just want you to temper your expectations with a guy like Jalen Hyatt and a guy like Darren Waller, just because Daniel Jones didn't favor those guys when he was on the field. But a guy he favored is Wan'Dale Robinson, so I would pick him up because his value is at least more guaranteed than the other options in this offense. Jameson Williams, 6 targets, 0 catches last week. Not the greatest outing for Jameson Williams, but I have him on this list because it's going to be the last opportunity to grab him. So if you want to bank on the upside of Jameson Williams, this is going to be the last opportunity to do that this week. Tyler Boyd for Cincinnati, of course, wide receiver 3 there. Let's not forget, this team is coming off of a bye. They have a very tough matchup this upcoming week against the Niners, so maybe you don't have to pick him up this week. But, I mean, going forward, we know Tyler Boyd is a very solid, flex option, especially if you're dealing with bye weeks. So he's just someone that you can have on the end of your bench. And worst case scenario, you can start him. And then Kendrick Bourne, the number one wide receiver there in New England. I want to preface this because a lot of people I'm seeing are saying this is the number one wide receiver pickup on the week. It's not. And I want to say that, sure, this New England offense looked better than ever last week against a tough Buffalo defense. But Kendrick Bourne started the year like this. Weeks 1 and 2, he had pretty good weeks. Everyone was rushing to pick him up, and then he falls off a cliff for another month. So Kendrick Bourne has a very spotty start. I wouldn't rush to pick him up, but he's definitely an option if you want a number one on your bench. At the running back position, we have guys like Zeke Elliott, of course, in that offense where Zeke Elliott is taking over that backfield over a guy like Ramondre Stevenson. It's kind of crazy to say that at this point in Zeke's career that he is taking over a backfield over a much younger and a much more talented guy, at least in this point in their careers, in my opinion. But Zeke Elliott, nonetheless, he's slowly getting more and more work. He's getting more and more ramped up. He's a guy that you at least want to roster at this point in the season. Tajay Spears, we've said it all year, just like Josh Downs. If Derrick Henry goes down, this is an offense that relies on Tajay Spears, because if this offense is down in games, which they are a lot, they do throw the ball more, and Tajay Spears is the receiving back here in Tennessee. Darrell Henderson, he might be the number one guy here to talk about this week, as he, there's a lot of questions going into last week. Is it going to be Zach Evans? Is it going to be Royce Freeman? Or is it going to be Darrell Henderson, the savvy veteran that they picked up off the practice squad? It was Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson, I'm not sure if he was on that Super Bowl team that went there against the Patriots a couple years back. Regardless, Darrell Henderson, he commanded the backfield. I think he had 18 total touches. This is the guy you want to target in that Rams backfield. Now that we know, in 25% of leagues, there's still a pretty good chance he's on your waivers. Roshan Johnson and Emari Demercado, these are guys that, Roshan is coming off of an injury. When he's back, there's no telling how this backfield will play out, but yeah, at least you want the most talented back there in Roshan Johnson. And Emari Demercado, this is a guy that we all dropped after last week because, he had a pretty good outing when James Conner went down, and then we didn't know, was it going to be Keontae Ingram, is it going to be Demercado? All we kind of knew was that the only way that Demercado was relevant is if he has all of the workload. Well, he had that last week, so Demercado was a fantasy relevant back, as Keontae Ingram saw like none of the work. So he is an interesting option going forward because at the end of the day, he is a running back one. At the tight end position here, not a lot has changed since last week, as I guess Dalton Kincaid is the biggest guy here. 42% owned in leagues, as we just got a report that Dawson Knox, he's going to have wrist surgery, so he's going to be out for a couple weeks. And this is the opportunity that we Kincaid owners have been looking for and have been waiting for all season long. This is the opportunity that Dalton Kincaid needs to capitalize on and become the tight end in this offense. As this is a guy that you'll see on your screen. He's not going to be a guy that's catching, 30, 40-yard routes down the field. This is an intermediate tight end, kind of like Dawson Knox, where he's going to catch those 8 to 10-yard passes, rack up a bunch of PPR points, and hopefully in the red zone, he can find his way in there once or twice a game and be fantasy relevant. He was a touchdown monster at Utah, and he has the potential to do that here with Josh Allen in Buffalo to ease the pressure off of Stephon Diggs. But Dalton Kincaid, number one tight end pickup on the week, maybe the number one pickup on the week, no doubt about it. Jonnu Smith, 42% of leagues, continues to be relevant aside Kyle Pitts, as this offense doesn't really rely on the receivers, more so they rely on their tight ends. So very interesting concept there in Atlanta. Not the biggest fan of their offense, but if you need a tight end, Jonnu Smith could be a good pickup. Michael Mayer continues to be relevant in this offense, getting more and more involved. Of course, another rookie tight end, but this is a guy that was compared to George Kittle coming out of Notre Dame. Okay, and he has the potential, and he's showing a little bit of that here early on in the year, whether if it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Brian Hoyer. So Michael Mayer, very interesting, at least bench option at this point in the season. Luke Musgrave and Hayden Hurst, these are guys that just had, if you're in a bind, these are guys that you want to have just at the end of your bench. It's worth a roster spot if you need a tight end, right? Or if you have to deal with some bye weeks. The last thing here is the quarterbacks. Kyler Murray is a guy that I want to highlight because he is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league. You like him or you don't. This, in my opinion, he's one of the most versatile quarterbacks in the league. Just with his rushing ability, and with that, he's been so fantasy relevant in his entire career, as he's averaged like a top 5, top 10 finish when he's fully healthy throughout his NFL career, which this is his first big injury. So let's not act like he's very injury prone. So with the modern medicine, he should be back here in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and I will say we also have to expect a week or two of ramp up to get used to playing at an NFL level. But at the very, very minimum, Kyler Murray is worth a backup quarterback slot. At the very minimum, you can pick him up and throw him in an IR slot for the next couple of weeks. Because let's say you have a guy like, player X. I don't even want to throw a name out there. And that quarterback carries you through the season, but he goes down with an injury. Kyler Murray has the potential to be dynamic and win you a week. The other four guys here, there's not much to mention. Gardner Minshew looked okay. Derek Carr continues to be steady. Tyson Bagent actually looks like a very solid quarterback there in Chicago. Will he continue his momentum? That's up for debates. And Will Levis is a guy that I would target if you're in like a 20-team league, because this is a guy that right now only owned in 1% of leagues, and nobody knows the direction of this Tennessee offense. But to me, I think Ryan Tannehill, if he's healthy, he will be the starter for this team going forward. So Will Levis, again, if you're in a 20-teamer, go ahead and pick up a guy like Will Levis. But without further ado, that's going to do it for today's show, as each and every week we run through these waivers, trying to help you guys on the way to fantasy championships. As, I called out the Jordan Addison explosion game last week, and you guys, of course, hopefully you listened and you capitalized on that. But without further ado, we'll be back tomorrow with our Week 8 predictions. Of course, we have some players of the week, our top 10 updated teams in the league, and of course, our predictions for each and every game. But if you enjoyed, just drop a like, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy, get out of here.